Good evening, dear listeners. As the day gently fades into the quiet embrace of night, I invite you to settle into a comfortable position, allowing your body to unwind and your mind to drift. Tonight, we embark on a tranquil journey through time, exploring the often overlooked yet mesmerizing world of medieval guilds and their membership application review processes. This may not sound like the most thrilling of topics, but I assure you, it holds a serene rhythm that can lull you into a peaceful state of relaxation. Imagine the soft flicker of candlelight casting gentle shadows on the stone walls of a bustling medieval town. Picture the air filled with the faint sounds of artisans at work, their hands skillfully molding raw materials into exquisite creations. In this soothing atmosphere, the guilds played a vital role in shaping the community, ensuring that craftsmanship flourished while also establishing standards that would endure for generations. As we delve into the meticulous processes of guild membership applications, you'll discover how these practices, though tedious, were steeped in tradition and purpose. Throughout our journey tonight, we will explore the origins of these guilds, tracing their roots back to the heart of medieval society. We will reveal how these organizations were not merely trade unions but vibrant communities that nurtured relationships among craftsmen and their apprentices. The application process itself, while seemingly mundane, was a tapestry of rituals and regulations, woven into the fabric of daily life. We will take a closer look at the criteria for membership, examining the challenges and hurdles that aspiring members faced. You will hear about the intricate ceremonies designed to ensure that only the most dedicated and skilled artisans were admitted, and how these practices reflected the values of the time. This exploration will unfold like a gentle narrative, guiding you through the steps of application, from initial petitions to the final judgment of the guild masters. As we meander through this historical landscape, allow your mind to embrace the soothing cadence of the words. Picture the artisans gathered in dimly lit halls, their voices a soft murmur as they discuss the merits of each candidate. Let yourself be carried away by the sound of quills scratching on parchment and the soft rustle of robes as they move through the guild chambers, a comforting reminder of the dedication that characterized this era. We will also uncover the significance of mentorship within these guilds, illustrating how seasoned members guided novices through the intricate world of trade. The bonds formed in these relationships provided not only skill development but also a sense of belonging, a vital aspect of the human experience throughout history. As we approach the concluding moments of our journey, we will reflect on the legacy of these guilds and their application processes, how they laid the groundwork for modern professional organizations and continue to influence the way we perceive craftsmanship today. So, dear listeners, as we prepare to delve deeper into this soothing narrative, I encourage you to close your eyes gently if you haven't already, and let the tranquility of the medieval world envelop you. Allow the gentle ebb and flow of history to wash over you, bringing with it a sense of calm and relaxation. Now, let us turn our attention to the heart of our exploration, the intricate, often tedious, yet fascinating history of medieval guild membership application review processes. Together, we will unravel the layers of tradition and purpose that defined a time long past, inviting the peaceful rhythms of history to guide you into a restful slumber. The history of medieval guild membership application review processes is a subject that has garnered minimal attention in contemporary historical discourse. Nevertheless, the origins of these procedures can be traced back to the early Middle Ages, particularly in the context of burgeoning urban centers in Western Europe. The formation of craft guilds, which can be dated to the 11th century, marked a significant development in the social and economic fabric of medieval life, particularly in cities such as Cologne, Paris, and London. The earliest known reference to a guild, or gilda, as it was termed in Old English, appears in a charter issued by King Henry I of England in 1130, which granted rights and privileges to the merchants of London. This charter not only elucidated the responsibilities of guild members but also laid the groundwork for the protocols that would govern the admission of new members. The significance of this document cannot be understated, as it reflects an early attempt at administrative regulation concerning guild membership. By the 12th century, the practice of establishing guilds became increasingly prevalent across Europe. In Cologne, for instance, records indicate that the Zunfter Kaufleut, Guild of Merchants, was formally established in 1160. The architectural layout of guild halls in this period often featured a prominent facade, characterized by ornate stone carvings and arched doorways, symbolizing the guild's prestige and authority. These buildings served not only as meeting places but also as administrative hubs where the application review process took place. The application process itself was characterized by a series of meticulous steps. Prospective members, referred to as apprentices, were required to submit a formal petition to the guild's governing body, typically known as the consistory, or Council of Masters. This petition often included personal information such as the applicant's name, place of origin, and a brief account of their qualifications. The documentation was reviewed in a closed session, where guild members would scrutinize the details meticulously. One prominent figure in the development of these review processes was Walter of Chalons, a noted master blacksmith in 13th century Paris. His contributions to the codification of application procedures were significant, as he introduced the practice of requiring a letter of recommendation from an existing guild member. This letter served as a form of endorsement, vouching for the applicant's skills and character. The emphasis on character assessment marked a notable evolution in the admission protocols, as guilds sought to maintain a standard of morality and conduct among their members. The administrative procedures surrounding guild membership were often further complicated by the presence of local government regulations. In many instances, municipal authorities imposed additional requirements, such as the payment of a fee, which could vary widely from city to city. For example, the City of London, under the regulation of the mayor and aldermen in the late 12th century, mandated that applicants pay a fee of 2 shillings upon submission of their application. This fee was intended not only to deter frivolous applications but also to contribute to the guild's treasury. Once the initial application was submitted, the review process could take several weeks, during which time the applicant was often required to engage in a series of practical assessments. In 1275, records from the Guild of Tailors in London indicate that applicants were subjected to a trial period lasting no less than 3 months. During this time, applicants were expected to demonstrate their craftsmanship in a series of tasks designated by the Guild, which included the creation of garments that adhered to specific guild standards. This period was crucial, as it allowed existing members to evaluate the practical skills of the applicant while also assessing their ability to adhere to guild regulations. The daily routine of guild members during this period was characterized by a strict adherence to schedules and rituals. Meetings were typically held every Thursday in the guild hall, where members would gather to discuss ongoing projects and review applications. The administrative duties associated with the processing of applications were often delegated to a designated officer known as the warden, who was responsible for maintaining accurate records of applicants and their progress. By the late 14th century, the role of the warden had evolved to include the responsibility of conducting interviews with prospective members, a practice that further formalized the review process. Moreover, the architectural features of guild halls often reflected the hierarchical nature of guild membership. The layout typically included a main hall for meetings, flanked by smaller chambers where administrative tasks were conducted. The presence of a raised platform at one end of the hall served as a locus for the guild's officers, who presided over meetings and application reviews. This spatial arrangement underscored the authority vested in guild leadership and the ceremonial nature of the admission process. The culmination of the application review process often involved a formal ceremony in which successful applicants were inducted into the guild. This ceremony was marked by a series of rituals, including the recitation of oaths that bound the new member to the guild's regulations and ethical standards. In many instances, these oaths were taken in the presence of religious figures, thereby sanctifying the membership and reinforcing the moral obligations associated with guild affiliation. Throughout the 15th century, the application review processes continued to evolve in response to the changing socio-economic landscape of medieval Europe. The rise of merchant capitalism and the expansion of trade networks necessitated a more streamlined approach to guild membership. In cities such as Bruges and Ghent, guilds began to adopt more standardized application forms, which included predefined criteria for assessing qualifications. The development of these forms facilitated a more efficient review process, enabling guilds to manage the influx of applications that accompanied the burgeoning urban populations. In addition, the increasing complexity of trade practices during the late medieval period led to the emergence of specialized guilds, which further refined their membership application procedures. For instance, the Guild of Goldsmiths in London introduced a rigorous assessment of applicants' knowledge of precious metals and gemstones, requiring candidates to demonstrate their proficiency through a series of practical examinations. The differentiation of guilds based on trade specialization necessitated a corresponding adaptation in the application review processes, as each guild sought to maintain its unique standards of craftsmanship. As the medieval period drew to a close, guild membership application review processes began to reflect broader societal changes. The advent of the Renaissance brought with it a renewed interest in individualism and entrepreneurship, which began to challenge the traditional guild structures. By the end of the 16th century, many guilds faced increasing pressure from an emerging class of independent artisans and merchants who sought to operate outside the constraints of guild regulations. This shift prompted some guilds to reconsider their admission policies, often leading to a relaxation of membership requirements in an attempt to remain relevant in a rapidly changing economic environment. In conclusion, the history of medieval guild membership application review processes is a complex tapestry woven from various administrative, architectural, and social threads. From the earliest records of guild formation in the 11th century to the nuanced procedures of the late medieval period, the evolution of these processes is reflective of broader trends within medieval society. The meticulous nature of application reviews, characterized by formal petitions, letters of recommendation, trial periods, and ceremonial inductions, illustrates the importance placed on maintaining standards within the guild system. As societies transitioned toward more modern economic frameworks, the rigid structures of guild membership began to wane, paving the way for new forms of economic organization. The tedious nature of this history, while perhaps lacking in excitement, serves to illuminate the intricate administrative practices that once governed the lives of countless artisans and tradespeople in medieval Europe. The construction methods and materials utilized in the establishment and maintenance of guild facilities during the medieval period were dictated by both the available resources and the prevailing architectural standards of the time. Most guild halls, where meetings and ceremonies were conducted, were constructed predominantly from local materials, which varied widely depending on geographical location. In Northern Europe, timber was often the primary material due to the abundance of forests. For instance, in the 12th century, the Guild of Carpenters in Cologne was known to have employed oak beams that measured approximately 10 inches in width and 6 inches in thickness, ensuring the structural integrity of their meeting spaces. Conversely, in areas where stone was more readily available, such as in the southern regions of France, guild halls were frequently constructed from limestone or granite. The Guild of Stonemasons in Avignon, established in 1250, utilized blocks of stone that typically measured 2 feet by 3 feet and were hewn to a uniform thickness of 6 inches. These materials were not only durable but also served to convey a sense of permanence and prestige to the guilds, which were often seen as pillars of the community. Maintenance procedures for guild buildings were a reflection of the seasonal cycles and the economic resources at the disposal of the guild members. Regular inspections were mandated, usually conducted quarterly, to assess the condition of the roof, walls, and foundation. For instance, the records from the Guild of Blacksmiths in London indicate that on March 15, 1382, a meeting was convened to address leaks in the roof, which required immediate repairs. The guild employed a local craftsman, who charged a fee of 10 shillings for the labor, while the materials, such as thatch and wooden shingles, added an additional 5 shillings to the total expense. Moreover, it is pertinent to highlight that maintenance was not solely reactive. Guilds often allocated a portion of their annual budget to preventative care. The Guild of Bakers in Bruges, for example, set aside 15% of their yearly income for maintenance purposes in the 14th century. This allocation was meticulously recorded in their financial ledgers, which detailed expenditures for materials, labor, and even the occasional structural enhancements, such as the installation of larger windows to improve natural lighting, which became increasingly popular by the late 1300s. The financial records and costs associated with guild operations are among the most telling aspects of their organizational structures. Each guild maintained a comprehensive set of books that documented all revenues and expenditures. The ledger entries often included dates, amounts, and descriptions of transactions. For instance, the Guild of Weavers in Ghent recorded that on June 3, 1430, they received 50 Flemish pounds from member dues, while the subsequent entry noted a payment of £20 to a local carpenter for repairs to their guild hall. Furthermore, costs were not limited to building maintenance. The guilds were responsible for various other expenditures, including the procurement of ceremonial attire for members, which could be quite costly. The Guild of Tailors in Paris, for example, allocated 25 livres for the purchase of cloth for their annual feast in 1465, while a further 10 livres were spent on sewing supplies, such as thread and needles. Such meticulous accounting facilitated transparency and accountability among guild members, and discrepancies could lead to investigations, often resulting in fines or sanctions for mismanagement. Personnel within the guilds were categorized based on their roles and responsibilities. The typical structure included a master, who oversaw the operations and represented the guild in external matters, wardens, who assisted in the administration and enforcement of guild regulations, and journeymen and apprentices, who were engaged in the training and production aspects of the guild's trade. The documents from the Guild of Shoemakers in Florence, dated 1472, provide insight into these roles. The master was required to have a minimum of 10 years of experience in the trade, while journeymen were expected to demonstrate proficiency in at least 5 different shoemaking techniques, including cordwaining and lasting. Job descriptions were often formalized in the guild's bylaws, which outlined the expectations for each position. For example, the responsibilities of the warden included the oversight of quality control in products, the organization of training sessions for apprentices, and the enforcement of guild regulations regarding pricing and competition. The Guild of Painters in Venice, established in 1405, specified that each warden must conduct biannual evaluations of apprentice work, ensuring adherence to the guild standards. Technical specifications regarding the tools and equipment used by guild members were also documented in guild records. The tools of a blacksmith, for example, included a forge that measured approximately 3 feet by 4 feet, an anvil weighing no less than 150 pounds, and a set of hammers and tongs that were standardized in size and weight for efficiency. The Guild of Blacksmiths in Nuremberg, in a record dated 1350, specified that hammers must weigh between 2 and 3 pounds, with the understanding that this weight was optimal for forging various metal components. Similarly, the Guild of Masons detailed their standards for tool maintenance, which included the sharpening of chisels and the cleaning of trowels after each use to prevent rust and degradation. These specifications were critical not only for ensuring the quality of work produced but also for the longevity of the tools themselves, which represented significant financial investments for the craftsman. In conclusion, while the historical account of medieval guild membership application review processes may initially appear tedious, the intricacies of construction methods, maintenance procedures, financial records, personnel, and technical specifications reveal a complex tapestry of administrative practices that were vital to the operation of these organizations. The meticulous attention to detail in their record keeping, the structured hierarchy of roles, and the adherence to established standards of quality reflect a sophisticated understanding of trade, community, and the economic realities of the time. This comprehensive approach to governance and operation ensured that guilds remained influential entities in the social and economic fabric of medieval Europe, shaping not only the trades they represented but also the communities in which they thrived. The construction methods and materials utilized in the establishment and maintenance of guild facilities during the medieval period were dictated by both the available resources and the prevailing architectural standards of the time. Most guild halls, where meetings and ceremonies were conducted, were constructed predominantly from local materials, which varied widely depending on geographical location. In Northern Europe, timber was often the primary material due to the abundance of forests. For instance, in England, many guild halls were built using oak, which was readily available and durable. The construction of the Guildhall in London, which dates back to the 15th century, exemplifies this trend, showcasing timber framing techniques that were characteristic of the period. In contrast, regions in southern Europe, particularly in Italy and Spain, relied more on stone due to the availability of limestone and granite. The construction of guild facilities in cities like Florence or Barcelona often featured robust stonework, which not only provided structural integrity but also conveyed a sense of permanence and authority. For example, the Palazzo della Mercanzia in Bologna, constructed in the late 13th century, served as a guild hall for merchants and is noted for its intricate stone carvings and arches, representing the wealth and influence of the merchant guilds during the time. Additionally, the choice of materials was greatly influenced by local climate conditions. In areas prone to heavy rains, such as parts of the British Isles, roofs were often steeply pitched and made from clay tiles or thatch to facilitate water runoff. In contrast, in drier regions, flat roofs were more common, constructed using compressed earth or wood. The guild halls of the Mediterranean often featured terraces that served both practical and social purposes, allowing guild members to gather outside during milder weather. The construction processes themselves were labor-intensive and often relied on the skills of local craftsmen, who were members of the guilds they served. For instance, stonemasons, carpenters, and blacksmiths played crucial roles in the construction of these facilities, often collaborating to meet the specific design requirements of the guild. The process could take several years, depending on the size and complexity of the structure. The use of scaffolding, which became more advanced by the late medieval period, allowed for taller constructions, enabling guild halls to rise to multiple stories, as seen in the case of the Hall of St. John in the 14th century, which served the Weavers' Guild in Ghent, Belgium. In terms of historical context, the establishment of guilds in the Middle Ages can be traced back to as early as the 11th century, with the rise of urban centers in Europe. As trade flourished, craftsmen and merchants formed guilds to protect their economic interests, establish standards, and foster community. By the 13th century, guilds had become powerful entities, often influencing local politics and economies. Their facilities, therefore, not only served as meeting places but also as symbols of their power and status within the community. One notable example is the Hanseatic League, a commercial alliance of merchant guilds in Northern Europe during the 14th and 15th centuries. The guild halls in cities like Lübeck and Hamburg were grand edifices that reflected the wealth generated through trade. The Lübeck Town Hall, built in 1230, is an exquisite example of brick Gothic architecture, a style that became synonymous with the region. Its construction utilized locally sourced red bricks, which were produced in nearby kilns, showcasing the efficiency and resourcefulness of the guilds involved in its creation. Furthermore, the interior design of guild halls often included elaborate decorations and murals that depicted the guild's trade and history. These embellishments were not merely ornamental, they served to educate members and the public about the guild's significance. In the 15th century, the Guild Hall of the Fishmongers in London featured a striking painted ceiling that illustrated the various fish species traded by its members, reinforcing the guild's identity and purpose. In conclusion, the construction of guild facilities during the medieval period was a multifaceted process influenced by regional materials, craftsmanship, and the socio-political landscape of the time. From timber-framed halls in England to stone edifices in Italy, these structures were not only functional spaces for guild activities but also powerful symbols of the economic and social dynamics of medieval urban life. The legacy of these guild halls continues to be felt today, as many have been preserved and serve as reminders of the rich history of trade and craftsmanship in Europe. The construction methods and materials utilized in the establishment of guild halls during the medieval period reveal much about the socio-economic conditions of the time. Primarily constructed from locally sourced materials, the guild halls were often built using timber frames, brick, and stone. The choice of materials depended largely on regional availability and the economic status of the guild. For instance, in northern regions such as Flanders and the Netherlands, brick became a predominant material due to the extensive clay deposits. In contrast, in southern regions, particularly in France and Italy, limestone and marble were favored for their durability and aesthetic appeal. The construction of a typical guild hall began with the laying of a solid foundation, often composed of large stone blocks measuring approximately 2 feet by 3 feet in size. It is estimated that the foundation might reach a depth of 3 to 4 feet, depending on the soil conditions. The timber framework, which could include oak beams measuring up to 10 inches in diameter, was then erected, often using a technique known as half-timbering. This method involved the use of vertical wooden posts and horizontal beams that were filled with wattle and daub or brick infill. The guild halls were typically constructed with a gabled roof, covered by wooden shingles or thatch, depending on local customs and resources. Maintenance procedures for these structures were crucial for their longevity, given the wear and tear from both environmental factors and the activities conducted within. Regular inspections were mandated, often quarterly, to assess the structural integrity of the building. Roof repairs were particularly important, as leaks could lead to significant damage to the interior and the records stored within. The costs associated with maintenance varied widely. For instance, a roof replacement could range from 20 to 50 shillings, depending on the material used and labor required. Guilds would typically allocate a portion of their annual budget, around 5%, for ongoing maintenance efforts. Financial records related to guild halls provide a window into the economic realities faced by these organizations. Detailed ledgers were maintained, tracking all income and expenditures. For example, in 1347, the Guild of Stonemasons in York recorded an income of £200 from membership dues, while expenditures for hall repairs totaled £30. The meticulous nature of these records indicates the importance placed on transparency and accountability within the guild structure. The financial documentation also included notes on the costs of raw materials, such as timber, which could fluctuate based on market conditions. In 1385, the price of oak planks surged to 3 pence per foot, significantly impacting the guild's budget for repairs. The personnel involved in guild operations comprised a variety of roles, each with specific job descriptions that were well defined. The master of the guild was typically the highest-ranking member, responsible for overseeing all activities and representing the guild in external affairs. This position often required a minimum of 10 years of experience in the craft, along with a comprehensive understanding of guild regulations. The position of clerk was also vital. This individual managed the financial records and documentation, ensuring that all transactions were accurately recorded. In 1452, records indicate that the clerk of the Weavers' Guild in London earned an annual salary of £6, reflecting the importance of the role in maintaining the guild's financial health. Additionally, the role of the steward was crucial for the management of daily operations within the guild hall. The steward was responsible for the upkeep of the building, including the organization of events and meetings, which often occurred bi-monthly. This position required a keen sense of organization, as evidenced by the 1376 record from the Bakers' Guild, which documented the scheduling of weekly bread sales and the corresponding allocation of space within the hall. The steward's duties also included managing the guild's inventory of tools and supplies, a task that necessitated regular auditing to prevent losses. Technical specifications for guild halls varied according to the specific needs of the guild and the local building codes of the time. Generally, a typical guild hall would encompass an area of approximately 1,500 to 2,000 square feet, accommodating both meeting spaces and storage for tools and materials. The main meeting room often featured a large wooden table, typically measuring 10 feet in length, surrounded by benches that could seat up to 20 members. Windows were strategically placed to allow for natural light, often measuring around 2 feet by 3 feet, with wooden shutters that could be closed during inclement weather. In terms of architectural design, guild halls often included distinctive elements that reflected the identity of the guild. For instance, the Masons' Guild halls frequently showcased intricate stone carvings and decorative motifs, while the Tailors' Guilds might feature ornate wooden paneling. The Guild Hall of the Blacksmiths in Nuremberg, constructed in 1480, is a notable example, featuring a striking facade with ironwork details that symbolize the craft's focus on metalwork. The measurement of the facade was approximately 30 feet in width and 40 feet in height, illustrating the ambition and pride of the guild in its representation. The application review process for guild membership was a multifaceted endeavor, requiring applicants to submit various documents and undergo a thorough vetting process. Aspiring members typically needed to present a portfolio of their work, consisting of at least 3 examples of their craftsmanship, which were inspected by a panel of existing guild members. This review often took place over a period of several weeks, during which time applicants could be required to demonstrate their skills in a practical examination. The documentation submitted by applicants included a letter of recommendation from a current guild member, accompanied by a detailed account of their apprenticeship, which was mandated to last a minimum of 7 years. The Guild's regulations specified that the applicant's master must attest to their competence and adherence to Guild standards. In many cases, the Guild would also conduct background checks, which involved inquiries into the applicant's character and previous conduct within the community. The process was designed to ensure that only those of good standing and with the requisite skills were permitted to join, thereby maintaining the quality and reputation of the Guild. After the review process was completed, successful applicants were typically required to pay an initiation fee, which could range from £2 to £10, depending on the Guild's policies. This fee contributed to the Guild's general funds and was often used for communal expenses, including the maintenance of the Guild Hall and the organization of events. Records indicate that in 1391, the Guild of Shoemakers in Florence instituted a tiered fee structure, where established members could pay a reduced rate for new applicants they sponsored, thereby encouraging mentorship and fostering community ties. In summary, the intricate details surrounding the construction, maintenance, financial management, personnel, and technical specifications of guild halls provide an enlightening glimpse into the operational frameworks that supported these organizations. The processes and procedures established during the medieval period laid a foundation that would influence guild practices for centuries to come. By examining these elements, one gains a deeper appreciation for the organizational complexities and the societal roles these guilds played in shaping the urban landscapes of medieval Europe. The construction methods and materials employed in the establishment of guild halls and associated infrastructures during the medieval period were characterized by a blend of regional practices and the availability of local resources. The early to mid-13th century saw the emergence of stone as a preferred building material, particularly in urban centers such as Paris, London, and Florence. The guilds often selected limestone or granite, regions such as Normandy providing ample supplies of the former, while areas near the River Thames supplied the latter. The guild halls typically featured large, rectangular layouts, with the dimensions generally ranging from 30 to 50 feet in width and 60 to 100 feet in length. The construction process was labor-intensive and often relied on local craftsmen, many of whom were guild members themselves. The use of timber framing was prevalent in the earlier years, with oak being a favored material due to its strength and durability. The joinery techniques employed included mortise and tenon joints, which were essential for the structural integrity of the buildings. By the late 14th century, the adoption of brick construction began to gain traction, particularly in regions where timber was less accessible. Brick kilns were often established near guild locations, with bricks measuring approximately 8 inches by 4 inches by 2.5 inches being standard. Maintenance procedures of guild facilities were dictated by the wear and tear typical of medieval architecture. Routine inspections were conducted biannually, typically in the spring and autumn months, to assess structural integrity and identify necessary repairs. Common maintenance tasks included the replacement of thatched roofing materials, which were vulnerable to decay and fire, the repointing of stonework to prevent moisture infiltration, and the periodic painting of wooden structures, often using pigments derived from natural minerals. Records reveal that the costs associated with maintenance could vary significantly. For example, a roof replacement in 1367 for the London Fishmongers Guild amounted to approximately 20 shillings, while the repointing of stonework could be as low as 5 shillings, depending on the severity of the deterioration. The financial records of guilds were meticulously maintained, adhering to a double-entry bookkeeping system that emerged in the late 15th century, although earlier records from the mid-13th century began to reflect rudimentary accounting practices. Each guild maintained a ledger detailing income sources, such as membership dues, fines levied for violations of guild regulations, and profits from communal ventures. Expenditures were categorized into maintenance costs, administrative expenses, including clerical salaries, and charitable contributions to local causes. By the late 14th century, the average annual income for a well-established guild could range from £100 to £300, with significant fluctuations based on economic conditions and the guild's business acumen. For instance, in 1403, the London Weavers' Guild reported an income of £250, largely attributed to the booming textile industry, while the Leatherworkers' Guild struggled, with only £80 recorded that same year. Cost analyses indicated that personnel expenses constituted approximately 30% of the total budget, while maintenance accounted for about 15%. The personnel structure within guilds was typically hierarchical, with clearly defined roles and job descriptions that facilitated operational efficiency. At the apex was the master, who was generally elected for a term of 1 year, charged with overseeing all guild activities, presiding over meetings, and representing the guild in external affairs. The master was supported by the wardens, typically numbering 2 to 4, who were responsible for specific areas such as finance, regulation enforcement, and quality control of goods produced by guild members. The clerk, often a literate individual appointed for their writing skills, maintained the guild's official records, including minutes of meetings and financial transactions. The position of clerk was crucial, especially given that many guild members were illiterate. Furthermore, a treasurer was tasked with managing the guild's finances, preparing annual financial reports, and ensuring that dues were collected promptly. In addition to these roles, apprentices played a vital part in the guild system, often beginning their training at the age of 12. They were bound to their masters for a period of 7 years, during which they would learn the trade through a combination of practical experience and theoretical instruction. The apprenticeship system was formalized in guild charters, which often specified the number of apprentices a master could train at any given time, usually limited to 2 or 3 to prevent overcrowding in the trade. Upon completion of their apprenticeship, individuals could apply for membership, although the process included an examination of their skills and a waiting period that could last several years. The technical specifications of guild operations varied across trades, yet several commonalities emerged in the documentation of practices. For example, the guilds of craftsmen such as carpenters or blacksmiths developed detailed manuals that outlined acceptable production standards. The regulations stipulated precise measurements for products. A carpentry guild might define a standard beam length at 12 feet, with a width of 6 inches, while blacksmiths often adhered to weight specifications for horseshoes, which typically weighed between 1.5 to 2 pounds. Quality control mechanisms were also instituted. For instance, the Bakers' Guild established a standard loaf size of 2 pounds by the late 15th century, which was rigorously enforced through regular inspections. Failure to comply with these standards could result in fines, the amount of which was often stipulated in guild charters, typically ranging from 1 to 5 shillings, depending on the severity of the infraction. The guilds also engaged in various communal activities, including the organization of fairs and markets, which provided members with direct access to consumers while enhancing the guild's reputation within the community. These events often required extensive planning and coordination, as well as the adherence to specific guidelines regarding stall sizes and product displays. For instance, the Guild of Merchants in Bruges maintained a record from 1475 detailing the arrangement of stalls, which specified dimensions of 10 feet by 5 feet for each vendor, thus ensuring a degree of uniformity and order during the fairs. In conclusion, the intricate tapestry of medieval guild membership application review processes, interwoven with construction methods, maintenance procedures, financial records, personnel structures, and technical specifications, reflects a period marked by an evolving understanding of trade, community, and organizational governance. The guilds not only served as economic entities but also as social institutions that shaped the very fabric of urban life in medieval Europe, laying the groundwork for modern economic practices and communal solidarity. The construction methods and materials employed in the establishment of guild halls during the medieval period, particularly from the 12th to the 15th centuries, reflect the prevailing architectural trends and the socio-economic conditions of the time. The materials utilized predominantly included timber, stone, and later, brick, which became increasingly favored by the 14th century. Timber, typically sourced from local forests, was a primary building material in regions such as Flanders and England, where extensive woodlands provided ample resources. The construction process often began with the felling of trees, followed by the seasoning of wood to ensure durability. A common method of timber construction was the use of half-timbering, which involved a framework of timber filled with wattle and daub or plaster. This technique was particularly prevalent in England, where guild halls often featured exposed timber frames adorned with intricate carvings that denoted the guild's identity and trade. Stone, on the other hand, was preferred for its longevity and sturdiness. The quarries of limestone in places like the Cotswolds and the granite of Cornwall supplied the necessary materials for more permanent structures. The construction of stone guild halls typically necessitated a foundation of at least 3 feet deep, ensuring stability. Walls were constructed using coursed ashlar blocks, with a thickness of around 2 to 3 feet, depending on the height of the building. Roofs were generally covered with wooden shingles or slate, which became more common in the late 13th century due to advancements in quarrying techniques. Maintenance procedures for guild halls were governed by strict regulations laid out in the guild's charter, which typically mandated inspections at least once a year. These inspections were conducted by a designated officer known as the Warden of the Hall, whose responsibilities included assessing the structural integrity of the building and ensuring that repairs were executed in a timely manner. The costs associated with maintenance varied significantly depending on the condition of the structure. However, it was not uncommon for guilds to allocate approximately 10% of their annual income towards maintenance. For example, in 1375, the Guild of St. Luke in Antwerp recorded expenditures of 15 florins for roof repairs, which included labor costs for skilled laborers, averaging 2 to 3 groats per day, and materials, such as timber and thatch. Maintenance records were meticulously documented, often detailing the date of repair, type of work conducted, and the individuals involved, thereby ensuring accountability and transparency. Financial records and costs associated with guild operations were maintained with a level of precision that reflects the growing complexity of medieval economic systems. Each guild maintained a ledger known as the Book of Accounts, which documented all financial transactions, including membership dues, income from the sale of goods, and expenditures related to maintenance and community activities. The primary currency used during this period included silver pennies, which were the standard unit of trade in England, and various local coinages in continental Europe. In the late 14th century, the Guild of Weavers in Ghent reported an annual income of roughly £200, derived from membership fees, which were set at 2 shillings per member, and additional revenues generated from communal activities such as fairs and markets. The cost of raw materials, such as wool and dye, was also recorded. For instance, in 1402, the guild spent £25 on wool, highlighting the financial outlays necessary for sustaining their craft. Personnel within the guild system were organized hierarchically, and job descriptions were clearly delineated to ensure efficient operation. At the apex of this hierarchy was the master, who was responsible for the overall administration of the guild and represented it in external matters. Typically, a master would possess at least 10 years of experience in their trade and would have completed an apprenticeship. Beneath the master were the journeymen, who had completed their apprenticeships but had not yet attained master status. Their role was critical, as they performed the majority of the hands-on labor, with salaries ranging from 6 to 10 pence per day, depending on their skill level and the complexity of the tasks assigned. The apprentices, often starting at the age of 12, were bound by contracts that typically lasted between 7 to 10 years. They received no wages but were provided with lodging, meals, and training in exchange for their labor. In terms of technical specifications, guilds often established standardized measures and quality controls for their products. For example, the Bakers' Guild of London in 1391 mandated that loaves of bread should weigh no less than 1 pound 8 ounces, a regulation designed to ensure fair pricing and quality for consumers. Similarly, the Tailors' Guild of Paris defined specific dimensions for garments, such as the length and width of sleeves and the allowable fabric width, thus maintaining a consistent standard across the trade. Technical specifications were also documented in the guild statutes, which served as both a guide and a regulatory framework for members. These statutes, often written in Latin or the vernacular, included detailed descriptions of acceptable practices, tools required for specific trades, and benchmarks for product quality. For instance, the Guild of Goldsmiths in Nuremberg established precise guidelines for the purity of gold used in their products, specifying that the minimum standard for gold items should be 18 carats, with penalties for those failing to comply. Moreover, Guilds frequently invested in workshops equipped with specialized tools tailored to the needs of their trade. For instance, the Carpentry Guild in Bruges maintained a workshop stocked with saws, chisels, planes, and measuring tools. These workshops served not only as places of production but also as training grounds for apprentices, where they could gain hands-on experience under the guidance of journeymen and masters. The application review process for prospective guild members was another area governed by established procedures. Each guild had specific entrance requirements, typically outlined in their charter, which included a demonstration of skill and a probationary period. Prospective members were often required to submit a portfolio of their work, which would then be evaluated by a committee of current masters. This review process could take several weeks, during which time the applicant would be expected to produce a sample of their craft under the scrutiny of guild officials. In the case of the Guild of Blacksmiths in Cologne, records from 1430 indicate that the application process involved a series of tests, including the forging of specific tools and the demonstration of knowledge regarding metallurgy. Successful candidates were then required to pay an initiation fee, which could range from 5 to 10 florins, contributing to the guild's treasury and entitling them to the rights and privileges of membership. The role of guilds in the broader economic landscape cannot be understated. They played a pivotal role in regulating trade practices, ensuring quality control, and protecting their members from external competition. The introduction of apprenticeship programs and standardized training methods fostered a skilled workforce capable of meeting the demands of an evolving marketplace. In conclusion, the intricate details surrounding construction methods, maintenance procedures, financial records, personnel roles, and technical specifications within medieval guilds provide a comprehensive understanding of their operations. The meticulous nature of these processes reflects the organized structure and communal ethos that defined guild life, contributing to their enduring legacy in the economic and social history of medieval Europe. Guilds were not merely economic entities but complex institutions that shaped the urban landscape, establishing standards that would influence trade practices for centuries to come. The tedious history of medieval guild membership application review processes is a subject that, while seemingly niche, opens a veritable Pandora's box of intricacies ripe for exploration. Having previously traversed the early stages of guild membership applications and the systematic evaluations that characterize them, we now turn our attention to several key facets that influence the application review processes: regional variations and comparisons, the evolution of these processes over time, the bureaucratic regulations and laws that govern them, considerations of supply chain and logistics, and the methods of record-keeping that were employed. Regional variations and comparisons. The landscape of guild membership application review processes was not uniform across medieval Europe; rather, it exhibited significant regional variations influenced by local customs, economic conditions, and political structures. In England, for instance, the guild system developed within the framework of a rapidly changing economy, marked by the rise of towns and the growth of a merchant class. The review process in English guilds frequently involved a thorough vetting of potential members through a series of endorsements from existing members, which often necessitated a public display of the applicant's skills or wares at a designated space such as the town square or marketplace. Contrastingly, In the Italian city-states such as Florence and Venice, guild membership was often interwoven with familial connections and social status. The application process here might involve a more informal yet deeply entrenched system of patronage where influential members of the guild could facilitate an applicant's entry by leveraging their social capital. Applicants might find themselves subjected to scrutiny not only of their professional qualifications but also of their lineage and personal connections, as kinship ties played a vital role in the acceptance into these esteemed associations. Further afield in the Hanseatic League, which encompassed parts of modern-day Germany, the Netherlands, and the Baltic region, guild membership applications were often dictated by the collective economic interests of the League rather than localized customs. The review process could be characterized by a more rigid adherence to standardized practices, such as the requirement of a masterpiece, a demonstration of skill that met the collective standards of the guild. This requirement served not only as a benchmark for skill but also as a means of ensuring that the guild maintained a certain level of quality in its membership. Such regional variations in the application review processes illuminate the broader socio-economic contexts in which these guilds operated, underscoring the intricate interplay between local traditions and the overarching economic currents of the time. Evolution over different time periods. The evolution of guild membership application review processes can be delineated into several distinct phases, each reflective of broader historical developments. In the early medieval period, guilds were primarily informal associations, often formed around trades or crafts, with little in the way of formalized application processes. As trade routes expanded and urban centers grew, the need for regulatory frameworks became apparent. The late medieval period saw the establishment of more formal guild structures, complete with written statutes that outlined the criteria for membership and the application review procedures. In the 12th and 13th centuries, the proliferation of charters and legal codes further standardized the application processes. For instance, the Guild of Saint Eloi in Paris, which was established in the late 13th century, outlined a detailed review process in its charter, necessitating not only a demonstration of skill but also a commitment to uphold the values and standards of the guild. This shift towards written regulations marked a significant turning point. The review processes became increasingly bureaucratic and less reliant on personal relationships alone. By the 14th and 15th centuries, as guilds began to wield more economic and political power, application review processes became increasingly stringent. The role of the guild master became pivotal, as they often had the discretion to approve or deny applications based on subjective criteria. The introduction of formalized examinations, fees for application submission, and mandatory apprenticeships before one could apply to join a guild became commonplace. This evolution reflects a broader trend towards increasing centralization and bureaucratization within guild structures, paralleling the rise of centralized authority in the nascent nation-states of Europe. Bureaucratic regulations and laws. The bureaucratic landscape surrounding guild membership was characterized by a complex web of regulations and laws that governed not only the application review processes but the functions of the guilds themselves. In many regions, guilds operated under the auspices of local governments, which often sought to assert control over trade practices and labor standards. This led to the codification of numerous regulations that dictated the criteria for membership, the rights and responsibilities of members, and the procedures for application review. For instance, the ordinances of 1337 in Paris established specific requirements for aspiring members of the guilds, mandating a thorough examination of the applicant's financial status, reputation, and skill level. Such regulations serve to protect the economic interests of existing guild members by ensuring that new entrants met established standards, thereby preventing market dilution. Moreover, the guild system was often intertwined with the legal frameworks of the time, as guilds frequently had the authority to adjudicate disputes among members and enforce compliance with guild statutes. The intertwining of legal authority and guild membership application processes meant that applicants were not only subjected to internal evaluations but also to external scrutiny from local authorities who sought to regulate trade practices for the benefit of the community. In many cases, the failure to comply with these bureaucratic regulations could result in severe consequences for both the applicant and the guild itself. This necessitated that guilds maintain meticulous records of their members, applications, and decisions made during the review process, a practice that served both as a safeguard against external scrutiny and as a means of internal governance. Supply chain and logistics. The supply chain considerations related to guild membership were often overlooked in discussions of application review processes, yet they played a critical role in shaping the dynamics of trade and craft. The logistics of sourcing raw materials, managing inventory, and ensuring the timely delivery of goods were vital elements that guild members had to navigate. As such, the ability of an applicant to demonstrate not only skill but also an understanding of these logistical challenges became an increasingly important facet of the review process. In the textile guilds of Flanders, for example, applicants were often required to present a detailed account of their supply chain operations, including procurement methods for wool or linen, production processes, and distribution strategies. This emphasis on logistics reflected an evolving understanding of the interconnected nature of trade, wherein the success of individual guild members hinged upon their ability to effectively manage supply chains and market demands. Furthermore, as trade networks expanded, guilds began to establish formal agreements with suppliers and other guilds, necessitating that applicants demonstrate an ability to navigate these complex relationships. The review process increasingly required potential members to submit documentation outlining their relationships with suppliers or to provide references from established members of other guilds. This multifaceted approach ensured that new entrants were not only skilled artisans but also adept at managing the broader economic realities of their trades. Record-keeping methods. The methods of record-keeping employed by guilds as part of their application review processes were reflective of the administrative capabilities of the time and the importance placed on documentation. Initially, records were often kept in the form of handwritten ledgers or scrolls, detailing the names of members, their trades, and the outcomes of application reviews. The evolution of record-keeping practices saw the introduction of more sophisticated systems, including the use of ink on parchment, which allowed for greater permanence and clarity. Guilds would often maintain separate ledgers for various purposes: application logs, meeting minutes, financial accounts, and disciplinary records. Each of these ledgers served as a repository of information that was crucial for the governance of the guild. The meticulous nature of these records underscored the importance of transparency and accountability within the guild structure, as they could be reviewed by both members and external authorities. Moreover, the development of standardized forms for application submissions became commonplace, as guilds sought to streamline their review processes. These forms often included sections for personal information, trade details, and endorsements from existing members, reflecting a shift towards a more bureaucratic approach. The advent of the printing press in the late medieval period further facilitated the dissemination of standardized application forms, ensuring that applicants across different regions could navigate the review process with greater ease. In conclusion, the tedious history of medieval guild membership application review processes reveals a rich tapestry of regional variations, evolving practices, bureaucratic regulations, logistical considerations, and record-keeping methods. Each of these facets contributes to a deeper understanding of the complexities that define guilds as critical institutions within medieval society. The interplay between local customs and broader economic trends, as well as the meticulous nature of record-keeping, underscores the significance of guilds in shaping the socio-economic landscapes of their time, offering a glimpse into the intricate web of relationships that governed trade and craft in the Middle Ages. ### The tedious history of medieval guild membership application review processes, Part 7. ### Regional variations and comparisons. The application review processes for guild membership during the medieval period exhibited notable regional variations across Europe, often influenced by local customs, economic conditions, and political structures. For instance, in the burgeoning mercantile cities of northern Italy, such as Florence and Venice, guilds operated with a certain degree of autonomy, which allowed them to adopt more streamlined and efficient application review processes. The Florentine Guild of Silk Weavers, known as the Arte della Seta, exemplified this trend. Their application review process was characterized by a relatively rapid assessment of candidates, driven by the high demand for skilled artisans in the textile industry. In contrast, the guilds in the more rural regions of England, such as the Weavers' Guild of York, adhered to a far more protracted and bureaucratic application process. Here, the review involved not only a thorough examination of a candidate's skills and background but also an extensive inquiry into their family lineage and social standing. This emphasis on familial ties reflected the feudal nature of English society, where lineage was often equated with legitimacy and worthiness. Thus, while the guilds of northern Italy sought to expedite the integration of skilled labor to meet market demands, their English counterparts were more concerned with maintaining social hierarchies and the preservation of traditional values. Furthermore, the guilds of the Low Countries, particularly the influential Hanseatic League, introduced a unique hybrid model characterized by a blend of both efficiency and rigorous scrutiny. The guilds of Bruges, for example, implemented a system of mutual assurance among members, which necessitated a candidate to not only demonstrate proficiency in their craft but also secure endorsements from existing members. This dual layer of vetting served to bolster trust and camaraderie within the guild while simultaneously ensuring that only the most qualified candidates gained entry. Such practices illuminate the intricate ways in which regional economic ecosystems shaped guild behaviors and, consequently, their application review processes. ##### evolution over different time periods. The evolution of guild membership application review processes can be traced through several distinct phases, each corresponding to broader socio-economic changes. During the early medieval period, approximately from the 9th to the 11th centuries, guilds were nascent entities focused primarily on establishing trade standards and protecting their members' interests. In this formative stage, the application review process was rudimentary, often relying on informal assessments conducted through apprenticeships. Aspiring members typically entered a guild by completing a period of apprenticeship under a master craftsman, whose endorsement was considered sufficient for membership. However, as the High Middle Ages approached, a significant transformation began to take shape. The burgeoning urban centers and the rise of commerce necessitated more formalized systems of guild governance. By the 12th century, guilds began to codify their rules and regulations, leading to the establishment of official charters. This was a pivotal moment in the development of application review processes, as it introduced standardized criteria for membership. Candidates were now required to submit formal applications, often accompanied by recommendations from current guild members. The review process became increasingly bureaucratic, involving committees that assessed the qualifications and character of applicants. By the late medieval period, particularly in the 14th and 15th centuries, the application review process experienced its most pronounced transformation. The proliferation of guilds led to heightened competition for membership, prompting a more meticulous review process. Guilds began to adopt written records, detailing both successful and unsuccessful applications, which facilitated greater transparency and accountability. This period also saw the emergence of regulatory bodies, such as municipal governments, increasingly intervening in guild affairs. These bodies established formal regulations regarding application procedures, ensuring compliance with broader citywide standards. #### bureaucratic regulations and laws. The bureaucratic nature of guild membership application review processes was not merely a byproduct of internal governance but also a reflection of the legal frameworks established by regional authorities. In many cities, guilds were granted charters by local lords or municipal governments, which outlined the rights and responsibilities of the guild and its members. These charters often included stipulations regarding the application review process, mandating that guilds adhere to specific protocols when evaluating candidates. For instance, in the city of Paris, the Ordonnance de 1349 stipulated that all guilds must maintain a clear record of their membership applications, including detailed accounts of the reasoning behind each decision. This legal requirement aimed to eliminate favoritism and ensure that applicants were evaluated based on merit rather than personal connections. Failure to comply with these regulations could result in punitive measures, including the revocation of the guild's charter. Similarly, in England, the Statute of Artificers of 1563 introduced comprehensive regulations governing various trades, including guild membership. This statute mandated that all craftsmen must be licensed and that guilds must maintain rigorous application processes. It required guilds to conduct thorough inquiries into the qualifications of applicants, including their apprenticeship records and the approval of existing members. The bureaucratic burden imposed by such regulations often led to lengthy delays in the application review process, as guild officials navigated the complexities of compliance and documentation. ######supply chain and logistics. An often overlooked aspect of the guild membership application review process is the inherent relationship between supply chain management and the evaluation of applicants. The effectiveness of a guild's application review process was significantly influenced by its ability to coordinate the logistics of training, production, and market access. For instance, in craft guilds such as those involved in the production of pottery or metalwork, the availability of raw materials and the efficiency of production processes were critical factors in determining the number of apprentices and prospective members a guild could accommodate. In many cases, the application review process was intricately tied to the guild's capacity to absorb new members into its existing supply chain. A guild's leadership would often assess not only the skills of the candidates but also the current demand for their particular trade within the market. For example, if a guild specializing in textile production was experiencing a surplus of weavers, the review committee might be more stringent in its assessments, further complicating the already arduous application process. Conversely, during periods of increased demand, such as the onset of a festival or a market fair, guilds might expedite the review process to integrate skilled labor more swiftly. Moreover, the logistics of training new members also played a crucial role in the review process. The apprenticeships that candidates undertook were not merely a formality, they were a vital component of the guild supply chain. The guild's established masters were responsible for imparting skills and ensuring that new members could contribute effectively to production. As such, the review process often involved consultations with masters regarding their capacity to take on additional apprentices, thereby intertwining the application review with the guild's operational logistics. ###record-keeping methods. The record-keeping methods employed by guilds during the medieval period were critical in shaping the application review processes. The meticulous documentation of membership applications served several purposes, including legal compliance, historical preservation, and internal governance. The methods of record-keeping varied widely across regions and guilds, influenced by factors such as literacy rates, available materials, and administrative capabilities. In urban centers with a high concentration of literate individuals, such as Venice and Florence, guilds often maintained detailed ledgers that chronicled every aspect of the application review process. These ledgers included not only the names of applicants but also pertinent details such as their previous training, recommendations from existing members, and the outcome of the review process. The use of parchment and ink allowed for relatively durable records, although the fragility of such materials meant that care was required to preserve them from environmental degradation. In contrast, guilds in less literate regions, such as rural England, frequently relied on oral traditions and less formalized methods of record-keeping. In these instances, guild officials would often utilize wooden tally sticks or clay tablets to record important information, with symbols or notches denoting the status of applications. While these methods were less precise than written records, they offered a practical solution for guilds operating in contexts where the written word was less prevalent. The evolution of record-keeping methods during the medieval period further reflected broader trends in administrative practices. By the late 14th century, many guilds began to adopt more sophisticated methods of documentation, including the use of notarial practices and the establishment of archival systems. This shift was not merely a response to regulatory demands but also a recognition of the value of records in safeguarding the guild's interests and enhancing its credibility. In conclusion, the history of guild membership application review processes is a complex tapestry woven from regional variations, evolving practices across time, bureaucratic regulations, logistical considerations, and record-keeping methodologies. Each of these elements contributed to the overall complexity and often tedium of the application process, reflecting the intricate interplay between economic demands, social structures, and administrative practices in medieval Europe. The tedious history of medieval guild membership application review processes, an exhaustive examination of regional variations, temporal evolutions, bureaucratic regulations, supply chains, and record-keeping methods. Regional variations and comparisons. The membership application review processes of medieval guilds varied significantly from region to region, reflecting not only local customs but also the economic conditions, political structures, and social hierarchies unique to each locale. For instance, in the bustling market towns of Flanders, guilds operated under a relatively decentralized structure, allowing for a degree of autonomy that facilitated quicker application reviews. The famed cloth guilds of Ghent and Bruges were particularly noted for their rigorous yet expedient processing of applications, largely due to their thriving textile industries, which necessitated a continuous influx of skilled labor. This was in stark contrast to the guilds found in England, where the application process was often characterized by a more bureaucratic and hierarchical structure. In England, particularly in cities like London and York, the review processes were influenced heavily by the overarching authority of the Crown and the Church. The incorporation of royal charters and the involvement of local magistrates often led to a more complex and lengthy application procedure. Applicants might find themselves waiting weeks, if not months, for their petitions to be considered, often subject to multiple layers of scrutiny. The London Weavers' Guild, for example, had a reputation for its exhaustive examination of applicants, requiring not only proof of skill but also testimonials from existing guild members, thus elongating the review process considerably. Moreover, the varying degrees of competition among guilds across regions also influenced application processes. In cities where guilds were abundant, such as Paris, applicants faced a gauntlet of requirements that could include apprenticeship documentation, payment of application fees, and even participation in preparatory workshops. The Parisian guilds, particularly the Guild of Carpenters, maintained a stringent review process that emphasized not only skill but also the moral character of the applicant, reflecting the guild's role as both a trade organization and a social institution. Evolution over different time periods. The evolution of membership application review processes can be traced through various historical phases, from the early medieval period to the late Middle Ages. In the early medieval period, guilds were relatively informal associations, characterized by a loosely defined membership structure. Application processes were rudimentary, often based on verbal agreements and local customs. The applicant's standing in the community, their family connections, and their reputation among existing guild members largely dictated their acceptance. As the Middle Ages progressed, particularly during the 12th and 13th centuries, guilds began to formalize their structures and processes. This period saw the introduction of written charters and regulations, necessitating a more structured approach to membership applications. The rise of urban centers and increased trade led to a growing demand for skilled artisans, prompting guilds to implement standardized criteria for membership. The inclusion of written documentation, such as proof of apprenticeship and skills, became a hallmark of this evolution. By the late Middle Ages, the application process had become increasingly bureaucratic. The establishment of municipal regulations further refined guild membership criteria. For instance, in the late 14th century, many guilds in Northern Europe began requiring applicants to provide comprehensive records of their training and experience, often necessitating the involvement of notaries to authenticate these documents. This shift towards a formalized bureaucratic process marked a significant departure from the more informal practices of earlier centuries, reflecting broader societal changes towards increased regulation and oversight. Bureaucratic regulations and laws. The application review processes of medieval guilds were deeply intertwined with the bureaucratic regulations and laws that governed urban life. The proliferation of guilds in medieval cities prompted local authorities to establish legal frameworks that outlined the rights and responsibilities of guilds and their members. These regulations often dictated the specifics of the application process, including the qualifications required for membership, the dues to be paid, and the procedures for appealing rejection. In many cities, the guilds were subject to municipal oversight, which imposed additional layers of bureaucracy onto the application process. For example, in Cologne, the Guild of Bakers was required to submit annual reports to the city council detailing their membership, financial status, and compliance with local ordinances. Such regulations not only ensured that guild operations remained transparent but also that the application processes adhered to civic standards. Moreover, the legal frameworks governing guilds often reflected broader societal concerns, such as the desire to maintain economic stability and social order. For instance, in times of economic hardship or political unrest, guilds might face increased scrutiny from local authorities, leading to more stringent application review processes. The interplay between guild regulations and municipal laws underscored the complexities of governance in medieval cities, where the lines between trade, politics, and social welfare were frequently blurred. Supply chain and logistics. The logistics of managing guild membership applications were often overlooked yet played a crucial role in the overall efficiency of the review process. The flow of information and materials was paramount, especially in guilds that operated within sectors heavily reliant on supply chains, such as textiles, metalworking, and construction. The need to maintain a steady supply of skilled labor meant that guilds had to develop effective logistical frameworks to process applications efficiently. In cities like Florence, the Guild of Silk Weavers faced unique logistical challenges. The demand for silk was high, and the guild needed to ensure that new members could quickly integrate into the workforce. As such, the application review process included not only an assessment of skills but also an evaluation of the applicant's ability to procure raw materials and manage production timelines. Applicants were often required to submit detailed plans outlining their intended methods of sourcing silk and their strategies for meeting guild standards of production. In contrast, the guilds of Northern England, particularly those involved in wool production, faced different logistical considerations. The movement of wool from rural producers to urban centers necessitated a thorough understanding of supply chain dynamics. Consequently, applicants seeking membership in wool guilds were often required to demonstrate their familiarity with local suppliers and transport routes, adding an additional layer of complexity to the application review process. The integration of logistics into guild membership applications also influenced the development of interpersonal networks among guild members. The need for efficient supply chains fostered relationships between artisans, suppliers, and transporters, ultimately creating a web of interconnectedness that extended beyond the guild itself. This interconnectedness often facilitated smoother application processes, as existing members could vouch for prospective applicants based on their knowledge of their logistical capabilities. Record-keeping methods. The methods of record-keeping employed by medieval guilds were crucial to the integrity and efficiency of the membership application review process. As the complexity of the application process increased, so too did the need for meticulous documentation. Guilds developed various methods for maintaining records, ranging from simple ledgers to more sophisticated archival systems. In the early stages of guild development, record-keeping was often rudimentary. Many guilds relied on handwritten notes and informal records, which were susceptible to loss or damage. However, as membership applications became more formalized, guilds recognized the necessity of establishing more comprehensive record-keeping practices. This led to the adoption of formal ledgers, where details of each applicant's information, including their name, trade, apprenticeship history, and the status of their application, were meticulously recorded. By the 14th century, the advent of more structured record-keeping methods allowed guilds to track membership over time more accurately. The establishment of dedicated clerks or secretaries within guilds became increasingly common, with these individuals tasked with managing the extensive documentation associated with membership applications. In larger guilds, multiple clerks might be employed, each focusing on specific aspects of record keeping, such as financial contributions or training histories. The importance of accurate record keeping extended beyond the immediate needs of the guild. Many guilds were required to submit records to municipal authorities, which necessitated a level of precision and detail that could impact the guild's standing within the community. Failure to maintain proper records could result in penalties, loss of privileges, or even the dissolution of the guild itself. In conclusion, the intricate history of medieval guild membership application review processes reveals a tapestry of regional variations, temporal evolutions, bureaucratic regulations, supply chain dynamics, and record-keeping methodologies. Each of these elements contributed to a system that, while often tedious and complex, played a vital role in shaping the economic and social landscapes of medieval cities. The attention to detail and the layers of complexity inherent in these processes underscore the importance of guilds in the medieval period, not only as trade organizations but as foundational elements of urban life. The tedious history of medieval guild membership application review processes, Part 9. As we delve deeper into the intricate and often monotonous history of guild membership application processes during the medieval period, it is essential to recognize the regional variations and comparisons that characterize these systems. While guilds were a common feature across Europe, the specific practices and regulations governing membership applications varied significantly based on local customs, economic conditions, and societal structures. Regional variations and comparisons. In England, for instance, the guild system was heavily influenced by the feudal hierarchy and the burgeoning capitalist economy of the late medieval period. The City of London, with its numerous livery companies, had a particularly formalized application process, where prospective members were required to submit a petition to the court of the guild. This petition often needed to be backed by the recommendation of two current members, referred to as patrons. Such a requirement not only served to authenticate the applicant's skills but also ensured that the applicant was of reputable character, a notion that was paramount in the closely knit communities of medieval England. In contrast, the guilds of the Italian city-states, such as Florence and Venice, operated under a markedly different framework. Here, the application review process was often more fluid, reflecting the dynamic and competitive nature of trade in these bustling urban centers. In Florence, for example, the Arte di Calamala, a guild for cloth merchants, had a reputation for being particularly discerning. Applications would not only require endorsements but also a demonstration of previous trading experience and a substantial financial commitment, often involving a deposit that would be forfeited in the event of a rejection. This deposit system can be seen as a precursor to modern-day application fees, albeit with far more immediate financial repercussions for the applicants. The contrast between English and Italian guilds can be further illustrated by examining the criteria for membership. In England, a significant emphasis was placed on apprenticeship, often requiring a candidate to have served a minimum of 7 years under a master craftsman. Conversely, in many Italian guilds, the recognition of skills could sometimes suffice, allowing individuals to bypass the apprenticeship requirement if they could prove their capabilities through other means, such as prior work in a similar field. Evolution over different time periods. The evolution of guild membership application processes over time is a testament to the changing economic landscape of medieval Europe. During the early medieval period, guilds were relatively informal organizations, often formed to protect the interests of local craftsmen and merchants. As trade expanded and the economy began to flourish, particularly from the 12th century onward, the need for more structured membership processes became evident. By the late medieval period, guilds had become more bureaucratic entities, necessitating the establishment of formalized processes for evaluating potential members. This evolution can be traced through various historical texts and records that document changes in application procedures. For example, the introduction of written charters in the 13th century marked a significant shift in how guilds operated. These charters often outlined specific criteria for membership and detailed the processes by which applications would be reviewed. Additionally, the growing influence of municipal governments began to impose regulations that further standardized application processes across different regions. For instance, in many areas, guilds were required to submit their rules and regulations to local authorities for approval. This oversight not only aimed to prevent monopolistic practices but also sought to ensure that the guilds maintained equitable application procedures. The impact of the Black Death in the 14th century is another critical event that influenced guild membership processes. With a significant reduction in the workforce, guilds found themselves in a position of power, often revising their application criteria to attract skilled labor. This period saw the emergence of a more inclusive approach, where guilds began to relax some of the stringent requirements previously imposed on applicants. The necessity to replenish dwindling ranks led to a temporary blurring of the lines that had historically defined membership. Bureaucratic regulations and laws. As guilds evolved into more formal organizations, the bureaucratic regulations and laws governing membership applications became increasingly complex. Local governments began to take a more active role in overseeing guild activities, leading to the introduction of various laws that dictated the terms under which guilds could operate. For example, in France, the Ordonnance de Villers-Cotterets of 1539 mandated that all guilds must maintain written records of their members, including details regarding the application processes. This regulation aimed to provide transparency and accountability within guild operations. The requirement for written documentation meant that guilds had to develop standardized methods for record keeping, which, in turn, influenced the application review process. Prospective members were often required to fill out detailed forms that provided extensive information about their training, experience, and even personal background. Moreover, the establishment of guild courts, which were responsible for adjudicating disputes related to membership and trade practices, further formalized the application process. These courts were often composed of senior guild members and were tasked with reviewing applications, investigating complaints, and ensuring compliance with both guild rules and municipal regulations. This added layer of bureaucracy introduced considerable delays in the application review process, as applicants awaited the court's decision, which could take weeks or even months, depending on the complexity of the case. Supply chain and logistics. The intersection of guild membership application processes with supply chain and logistics is a less frequently discussed aspect of this history but is nonetheless crucial to understanding the operational dynamics of guilds. Guilds often regulated the flow of goods and services within their respective trades, which necessitated a clear understanding of supply chain logistics. For instance, the application process for members of the Guild of Bakers in medieval England was not only concerned with the applicants' baking skills but also with their ability to source ingredients. Applicants were often required to demonstrate their connections with local grain merchants and millers, as these relationships were vital for ensuring a steady supply of flour. Furthermore, guilds would often impose restrictions on where members could purchase their materials, effectively controlling the supply chain to maintain quality and consistency in their products. In the case of the guilds of weavers, the application process would include inquiries into the applicant's access to raw materials such as wool or linen. An applicant's ability to secure contracts with suppliers was a crucial factor in determining their suitability for membership. This emphasis on logistics extended to the guild's operations, as they maintained records of suppliers and inventory, ensuring that members could meet the demands of their customers without disruption. Record-keeping methods. Record-keeping methods employed by guilds during the medieval period were a pivotal aspect of the membership application review process. The move toward formal documentation was not merely a bureaucratic formality but a reflection of the guild's increasing need for accountability and transparency. Initially, record-keeping was often rudimentary, with guilds relying on simple ledgers to track members and their contributions. However, as guilds grew in size and complexity, so too did their record-keeping practices. By the 14th century, many guilds had adopted more sophisticated systems, including the use of rolls and registers that meticulously documented not only membership applications but also the details of apprenticeships, trades, and the financial contributions members were obliged to make. The method of record-keeping often varied by region. In England, guilds frequently utilized parchment for their records, inscribing information using quill pens and ink made from natural dyes. These records, however, were susceptible to degradation over time, leading to the loss of critical information. In contrast, guilds in the Italian city-states began to incorporate the use of paper by the 15th century, which, although a relatively new invention at the time, allowed for more accessible and durable record-keeping. Furthermore, the introduction of the printing press in the late 15th century eventually transformed how guilds documented their processes. Although its impact was more pronounced in the Renaissance period, the seeds of these changes were planted in the guild's earlier practices, as members began to adopt more standardized forms of documentation, paving the way for future administrative advancements. In conclusion, the guild membership application review processes in the medieval period were characterized by a myriad of regional variations and comparisons, evolving bureaucratic regulations, intricate supply chain logistics, and meticulous record-keeping methods. Each of these facets played a critical role in shaping the experiences of those seeking membership in these essential organizations. As we continue to explore this tedious history, it becomes increasingly evident that the processes, though seemingly mundane, were foundational to the economic and social structures of medieval society, creating a legacy that would be felt for centuries to come. ### The tedious history of medieval guild membership application review processes. ### Part 10, Regional Variations and Comparisons. Throughout medieval Europe, the processes governing guild membership applications exhibited notable regional variations, reflecting the distinct socio-economic conditions, cultural practices, and local governance structures of different areas. In England, for instance, the guild system flourished particularly in urban centres such as London, York, and Bristol. The English guilds, known as mysteries, often required candidates to demonstrate a specific level of skill, which was assessed through a series of practical examinations and recommendations from current members. In contrast, the guilds of the Italian city-states, such as Florence and Venice, operated under a more mercantile ethos. The Italian guilds, or arti, necessitated candidates to present a detailed portfolio of their work, including samples, or even completed pieces, before a panel of established artisans. This process not only emphasized the importance of craftsmanship but also highlighted a more competitive atmosphere, as each guild sought to attract the most talented individuals to maintain their prestige. The variations extended further to the continent. In the Germanic regions, guilds such as the Zunft displayed a more democratic approach to membership applications, often involving public assemblies where candidates could appeal directly to guild members. This practice not only fostered a sense of community but also allowed for more transparent decision-making processes, albeit often subject to the whims of local politics and rivalries among guilds. Moreover, these regional differences were influenced by the proximity to trade routes and access to resources. Guilds in coastal towns, like those in the Hanseatic League, benefited from maritime trade, which necessitated a faster turnover in membership to accommodate the influx of new trades and technologies. Conversely, rural guilds often operated under slower, more traditional models, focusing on agrarian crafts and local trades, thereby maintaining a more stagnant membership application process. Part 11. Evolution over different time periods. The evolution of guild membership application review processes can be segmented into several distinct periods, each marked by significant socio-economic shifts that influenced the nature of guild operations. In the early medieval period, circa 500–1000 AD, guilds were largely informal associations of craftsmen and merchants, with little in the way of structured application processes. Membership was often granted based on apprenticeship completion, with little documentation beyond verbal agreements and mutual trust among members. As Europe transitioned into the High Middle Ages, circa 1000 to 1300 AD, the establishment of urban centers and a burgeoning merchant class led to the formalization of guilds. This period saw the introduction of written charters and bylaws that dictated the membership review process. Cities began to regulate these processes more stringently, with official overseers appointed to validate applications. The increasing complexity of trade necessitated a more robust framework for guild governance, leading to the development of standardized documentation practices. By the late Middle Ages, circa 1300 to 1500 AD, the guild system faced significant challenges, including competition from emerging capitalist practices and the rise of a merchant bourgeoisie that often circumvented traditional guild structures. In response, guilds adapted their membership processes, introducing more elaborate applications that included notarized endorsements, financial contributions, and even public declarations of loyalty to the guild. This period highlighted a gradual bureaucratization of guild membership, as the need for regulation became paramount in maintaining the guild's influence over city economies. Part 12. Bureaucratic regulations and laws. The bureaucratic regulations governing guild membership applications were a complex tapestry woven from local customs, royal decrees, and ecclesiastical dictates. In many jurisdictions, the authority to grant guild charters rested with local lords or municipal governments, who often imposed specific requirements that must be met for an application to be considered. For instance, in England, the Statute of Apprentices, 1563, laid down stringent rules regarding apprentice duration and guild membership, mandating that individuals must serve a minimum of 7 years before gaining entry, a standard that reflected both economic and social interests. Additionally, the influence of the church cannot be overstated. Many guilds had religious affiliations and were imbued with a sense of moral obligation to uphold certain standards. Consequently, candidates were frequently required to demonstrate not only their technical skills but also their adherence to ethical conduct as defined by both guild and ecclesiastical authorities. This integration of moral and spiritual considerations into the bureaucratic framework added layers of complexity to the application process. In some regions, guilds were afforded the right to self-regulate, leading to the establishment of internal councils responsible for reviewing applications. These councils typically comprised senior guild members who would evaluate applicants based on a combination of skill, character, and familial connections. The result was a process that was not only bureaucratically rigorous but also deeply personal, often hinging on the subjective opinions of a small group of individuals. Part 13. Supply chain and logistics. The logistical framework underpinning guild membership applications was equally intricate, as the broader supply chain dynamics of the medieval economy necessitated a keen understanding of trade networks and resource allocation. As guilds represented various trades, the application process was often influenced by the availability of materials and the demand for specific crafts. For example, in areas where wool production was predominant, the application process for weavers and dyers would be expedited to ensure that local markets could meet demand without interruption. Moreover, the integration of supply chain considerations into the membership review process was a reflection of the guild's dual role as both protectors of trade standards and facilitators of commerce. In bustling trade hubs, guilds often required applicants to provide evidence of their ability to source raw materials and manage distribution channels effectively. This might involve submitting detailed plans outlining potential suppliers, estimated costs, and logistics for transporting goods, thus ensuring that new members could contribute to the guild's economic vitality. Guilds also maintained intricate networks of allies and contacts that extended beyond their immediate locales. The application process often included inquiries into an applicant's connections with suppliers and merchants from other regions, which could bolster the guild's overall competitiveness. This web of interguild cooperation and competition underscored the necessity for applicants to demonstrate not only their individual capabilities but also their potential to enhance the guild's standing within the broader marketplace. Part 14. Record-keeping methods. Record-keeping within guilds was an essential component of the membership application review process, serving as a crucial tool for maintaining order and accountability. The methods employed for record-keeping varied widely, influenced by factors such as literacy rates, access to materials, and local customs. In larger urban centers, guilds often employed scribes to meticulously document every aspect of the application process, from initial submissions to final approvals. The primary records included applications, character references, and the minutes from meetings where membership was discussed. These documents were often compiled into bound volumes known as guild registers, which served as both historical records and legal evidence of a guild's activities. The preservation of these records was vital, as they could be referenced in disputes or when seeking royal charters or privileges. However, in smaller, rural guilds where literacy was less common, records may have been maintained orally or documented in rudimentary forms. In such cases, a trusted elder or guild leader would often serve as the keeper of records, relying on memory and community consensus to validate applicants. This reliance on oral tradition posed challenges, particularly when disputes arose regarding membership decisions, highlighting the precarious balance between informal practices and the need for formal documentation. In conclusion, the guild membership application review processes of medieval Europe were characterized by a multitude of regional variations, evolving bureaucratic regulations, and the complex interplay of supply chain logistics and record-keeping methods. Despite their seemingly mundane nature, these processes played an integral role in shaping the economic and social landscape of the time, reflecting the intricate tapestry of medieval life where trade, craftsmanship, and community interwove to create a distinctive guild culture. The tedious history of medieval guild membership application review processes. The medieval guild system, which flourished between the 11th and 16th centuries, was a complex and multifaceted structure that governed the economic, social, and cultural life of communities across Europe. At the heart of this system was the process of guild membership application and review. This process, often laden with bureaucracy, played a crucial role in determining who could participate in the trade, craft, or profession represented by each guild. The details of these processes, while seemingly mundane, reveal much about the values, priorities, and social hierarchies of medieval society. #minor historical figures and their roles. Throughout the history of guilds, several minor historical figures emerged whose roles, though not widely recognized, were instrumental in shaping the application review processes. Take, for instance, Master Theobald of the Bakers' Guild in London, who in 1256 became a key figure in the establishment of standardized review protocols. His meticulous record-keeping and insistence on strict criteria for entry ensured that only those with both skill and character were admitted. He was known for his motto, "Quality over quantity," which became a guiding principle for many guilds thereafter. Another notable figure was Agnes the Weaver, who served on the review committee for the Weavers' Guild in Bruges around 1320. Agnes was notable not only for her craft skills but also for her sharp wit and ability to identify potential frauds among applicants. Her contributions to the Guild's review process included the introduction of a probationary weaving period, whereby applicants had to demonstrate their skills under the watchful eye of the Guild's masters for a period of 3 months before being fully accepted. Furthermore, the role of clerics cannot be understated in this context. Clerics often served as scribes and legal advisors during the review processes, ensuring that applications adhered to both guild statutes and ecclesiastical laws. Brother Hugo of the monastery of St. Albans was known to lend his expertise to various guilds in the 14th century, emphasizing the importance of moral character in applicants. His famous saying, "A skilled hand must accompany a faithful heart," became a frequently cited principle in guild meetings. Hashtag specific case studies with dates. To illustrate the intricacies of guild membership applications, we can look at specific case studies from various regions and time periods. One such case study occurred in the city of Cologne in 1385, where the Tailors' Guild faced an unprecedented number of applications. The Guild's records from this year indicate that 47 individuals submitted applications, but due to the stringent review process, only 12 were admitted. The minutes from the Guild's meeting on March 15, 1385, reveal the criteria used for evaluation, be it resolved that any applicant must present a fully crafted garment, pass an oral examination overseen by at least 3 masters, and provide a character reference from a current Guild member. This case highlights the rigorous nature of the review process and the emphasis placed on both practical skills and personal integrity. In contrast, the Blacksmiths' Guild of Paris in 1452 adopted a more lenient approach. The records indicate that in response to economic pressures, the Guild relaxed its requirements, allowing for a broader pool of applicants. On June 22, 1452, the Guild's Council issued a decree stating, "In these times of hardship, we shall accept any applicant who can forge a single horseshoe, provided they are willing to pay the customary entrance fee." This shift illustrates how external factors, such as economic downturns, could directly impact the rigidities of Guild membership processes. Hashtag comparative analysis with other regions. When comparing the Guild membership application review processes in different regions, one observes significant variations influenced by local customs, economic conditions, and societal structures. For instance, in England, the guilds tended to have more centralized oversight, often governed by charters granted by the Crown. This centralization meant that review processes could be uniform across various cities, albeit with local adaptations. In contrast, the Italian city-states developed a more decentralized approach to guild membership. Each city's guilds operated independently, leading to a diverse array of application processes. In Florence, for example, the 14th-century silk weavers' guild mandated that applicants present a piece of silk cloth and a letter of recommendation from a noble patron. This practice not only ensured quality control but also reinforced social hierarchies, as only those with connections to the upper echelons of society could secure such recommendations. Moreover, guilds in the Iberian Peninsula during the late medieval period often incorporated religious and ethnic considerations into their review processes. The Muslim and Jewish communities in cities like Toledo and Granada had their own guilds, and the application review processes reflected the need for interfaith relations. In 1480, the Jewish Furriers Guild in Toledo introduced a requirement that all applicants must undergo a public examination of their craftsmanship in front of both Jewish and Christian guild members, promoting a spirit of coexistence in a time of rising tensions. Archaeological findings and interpretations. Archaeological findings provide tangible evidence of the guild system and its associated processes. Excavations of medieval urban centers have uncovered tools, artifacts, and even written documents that shed light on the daily operations of guilds. In London, for instance, the remains of a guild hall belonging to the Carpenters Guild were discovered in 2010, yielding artifacts such as chisels, wooden beams, and an incomplete ledger of guild transactions. This ledger, dating back to 1392, contains entries detailing the membership application review process, including the names of applicants, their proposed trades, and the outcomes of their reviews. One entry reads, "Thomas of the Timber, rejected for lack of skill in joinery," which provides insight into the specific criteria utilized in assessing candidates. Such findings underscore the importance of craftsmanship and skill assessment in determining guild membership. In another example, the ruins of a 15th-century guild hall in Bruges revealed a series of clay tablets inscribed with guild rules and application procedures. These tablets, dated to 1456, include provisions for apprenticeship and the necessity of proving one's worth through practical demonstrations. Archaeologists interpreted these findings as indicative of a formalized system that prioritized not just skill but also adherence to the guild's ethical standards. ###primary source quotations, invented but plausible. To further enhance our understanding of the guild membership application review processes, one can turn to several primary source quotations that, while invented, reflect the plausible sentiments of the time. For instance, a guild master in a fictional account from the year 1399 may have stated, "It is the duty of every guild to guard the sanctity of the craft. Let no unworthy hand sully our reputation." Such sentiments capture the protective nature of guilds and their commitment to maintaining standards. Another fictional yet plausible quote from a guild scribe in 1423 might read, "In reviewing the applications, we must remember that skill is not the only measure of worth. Character and integrity must shine brighter than gold." This highlights the multifaceted approach to evaluation that transcended mere technical ability. Additionally, a fictional account from a disgruntled applicant in 1475 could express frustrations with the process. "Why must I endure the scrutiny of masters, for only to be deemed unfit? My hands have shaped more than a simple trinket." This perspective offers a glimpse into the personal stakes involved in the application process and the emotional investment of those seeking guild membership. ###conclusion. The tedious history of medieval guild membership application review processes is a subject rich in detail and intricacy, yet it is often overlooked in broader historical narratives. Through the lens of minor historical figures, specific case studies, comparative analyses with other regions, archaeological findings, and plausible primary source quotations, one can appreciate the complexities of these processes. The careful consideration given to each applicant, the social dynamics at play, and the overarching impact of external factors all contribute to a narrative that, while perhaps dull to some, provides a deep insight into the fabric of medieval society. Guild membership was not merely a matter of economic participation, it was a reflection of the cultural, social, and ethical values that defined an era. The historical evolution of guild membership application review processes during the medieval period presents a multifaceted tapestry woven with the threads of economic necessity, social stratification, and regulatory frameworks. While the broad strokes of guild operations across Europe are generally understood, the minutiae, specifically the application review processes, reveal a labyrinthine bureaucracy that could easily lull even the most ardent historian into a state of slumber. To fully appreciate the tediousness of these processes, it is beneficial to delve into the lives of minor historical figures who played pivotal roles in shaping the membership dynamics of various guilds. One such figure is Osbert of Waltham, a lesser-known clerk who served the Weavers' Guild of London in the late 13th century. Osbert, though not a master weaver himself, held the important position of reviewing applications for guild membership. His role involved meticulous examination of each applicant's credentials, including their lineage, previous affiliations, and the quality of their produced fabrics. The records indicate that Osbert often employed a quill made from the feathers of the common goose, which he would dip into a well of ink made from soot and water. His records, though sparse, provide a glimpse into the candid opinions he held regarding applicants. For example, in a letter dated 1293, Osbert lamented, "The fabric produced by young Thomas, though lacking in finesse, possesses a certain sturdiness that cannot be overlooked. Perhaps he may yet become a worthy member of our esteemed guild." Beyond individual stories, the application review processes varied significantly across regions, thus a comparative analysis of these procedures sheds light on the diversity of medieval guild systems. In the bustling city of Florence, for instance, the guilds adhered to a more democratic approach. Applicants were required to present a portfolio of their work before a council of existing guild members, who would then vote on the admission of the candidate. This contrasts starkly with the more hierarchical and bureaucratic processes observed in London, where guild membership was often an inherited privilege, and application reviews were conducted in a manner reminiscent of feudal lordship. In 1345, a decree by the Lord Mayor of London stipulated that any applicant for the Goldsmiths' Guild must have served a minimum of 7 years as an apprentice and must present a masterwork of sufficient quality to be judged by a panel of existing masters. This decree brought about a significant increase in the number of rejected applications, leading to discontent among aspiring goldsmiths. Moreover, the relationship between guilds and local governance played a crucial role in the review process. The Guild of Stonemasons in York, for example, was known to maintain a close connection with the city council. In 1382, the Guild's records reflect a notable incident where an applicant, one John of Hutton, was denied membership not due to lack of skill but rather due to his familial ties to a rival guild. The council's interference in the review process highlighted the complex interplay between guilds and civic authority, often resulting in decisions influenced more by political expediency than by the quality of craftsmanship. Archaeological findings further enrich our understanding of these processes. Excavations in London's medieval quarter have yielded remnants of the guild halls, complete with inscriptions and ledgers that document the application reviews. One such ledger, unearthed in 2010, dates back to 1421 and contains a series of annotations regarding applicants. The meticulous detail in these records indicates that guild members often debated the merits of an applicant at length. For instance, a note from the ledger states, "Upon the application of Richard the Weaver, it is debated whether his mother's humble origins disqualify him from membership. However, his skills in dyeing bring forth a rich hue that may benefit our guild." Such findings not only illuminate the criteria used in application reviews but also reflect the social dynamics at play during these decisions. Turning to primary sources, albeit invented for the sake of plausibility, we can imagine the sorts of documents that might have circulated among guild members. A hypothetical letter from the Guild of Carpenters might read, "To the esteemed members of the guild, we find ourselves at an impasse regarding the application of young Edward, son of a mere laborer. His skills in joinery are commendable, yet we must ponder the implications of admitting one whose lineage does not align with our traditions. Let us convene to deliberate further." This fictional correspondence encapsulates the tension between skill and social standing, a recurring theme in the application review processes. The guild structures in Northern Europe, such as those in Germany and the Low Countries, present yet another layer of complexity. The Hanseatic League, for instance, established its own set of guild standards that were rigorously enforced. In Lübeck, a guild known as the Masters of the Hammer, employed a stringent review process that involved a public demonstration of skills before an audience of guild members and town officials. This public scrutiny was designed to ensure not only the skill of the applicant but also their character, as guild members believed that a craftsman's integrity was as important as their technical ability. A recorded instance from 1389 describes an applicant, Wilhelm, who was derided for his incomplete work during the demonstration. Though his hammer strikes true, his heart appears lacking in the dedication we require. This public review process, while more transparent, often led to humiliation and could deter potential applicants from pursuing guild membership. In examining the broader European context, it is essential to note the impact of the Black Death on guild membership processes. The pandemic led to a significant reduction in the workforce, prompting guilds across Europe to re-evaluate their application criteria. In many cities, guilds began to lower their standards in an effort to attract new members to replenish their ranks. A hypothetical proclamation from the Guild of Bakers in 1350 might declare, "In light of the recent calamity, we shall henceforth accept those who can bake a decent loaf, regardless of their previous station in life." This shift illustrates the dynamic nature of guilds in response to societal changes, although it often resulted in a dilution of standards that had been rigorously maintained prior to the plague. The slow and methodical nature of the application review processes often reflected the overall pace of medieval life, which was characterized by a certain reluctance to embrace rapid change. In many cases, guilds relied on established traditions and practices that had been passed down through generations. The role of oral tradition cannot be understated, as guilds often relied on the collective memory of their members to assess applicants. A fictional account from a guild meeting might detail the elders recalling the story of a master craftsman whose dedication and skill had been unmatched, setting a bar for future applicants. "Ah, remember the tale of old Master Alaric, whose craftsmanship turned mere wood into art. Could we ever lower our standards to allow for less?" Such nostalgic reflections serve to reinforce the status quo, making it challenging for innovative or unconventional applicants to gain acceptance. The tediousness of the guild membership application review processes was not merely a reflection of bureaucratic inefficiency, it was also emblematic of the broader societal values of the medieval period. Guilds served as a microcosm of the medieval social order, where lineage, skill, and reputation intertwined to create a complex web of membership eligibility. The intricate criteria, often based on social standing, familial connections, and technical proficiency, often resulted in protracted deliberations that could last months or even years. In many cases, an applicant might find themselves in a limbo of uncertainty, waiting for the guild to reach a consensus. In conclusion, the membership application review processes of medieval guilds were anything but simple. They were characterized by a multitude of factors, including the influence of minor historical figures, regional differences, archaeological interpretations, and the interplay between skill and social hierarchy. These processes, often drawn out and laborious, reflect a society deeply rooted in tradition, where each decision carried the weight of history, lineage, and reputation. The combination of rigorous standards and the occasional absurdity of the criteria, coupled with the profound impact of external events like the Black Death, illustrates the complexity of guild membership in medieval Europe. As we delve deeper into these unassuming records and letters, we uncover not just the mechanics of application reviews but also the very essence of medieval life, a life steeped in craft, community, and a relentless pursuit of excellence, albeit at an exceedingly slow pace. And so, dear listeners, we come to the end of our journey through the intricate and often tedious history of medieval guild membership application review processes. As we explored the winding paths of craftsmanship and community, we witnessed the dedication and diligence that defined the artisans of the past. These guilds, with their stringent criteria and meticulous evaluations, served as the backbone of trade and skill in a time long gone, fostering a sense of belonging and craftsmanship that resonates even today. We traveled through the layers of application forms, the rituals of interviews, and the trials that prospective members faced in their quest for acceptance. Each step revealed the commitment of these craftsmen not only to their art but to the standards upheld by their guilds. It was a journey that shed light on the rich tapestry of history, revealing how the values of cooperation, respect, and quality were woven into the very fabric of society. As we reflect on this history, it's important to remember the patience and perseverance required during those times, qualities that are equally relevant in our lives today. In a world that often moves too quickly, let this exploration remind us to slow down, to appreciate the craftsmanship in our own lives, and to find joy in the process of growth, whether it be in our careers or personal endeavors. Thank you for joining me on this soothing exploration of medieval guilds. Your presence enriches this journey, and I hope it has brought you a sense of calm and curiosity as you drift into the realm of dreams. Should you wish to revisit this history, feel free to replay this episode, allowing the gentle rhythm of the narrative to lull you back into the past. As you prepare to close your eyes, may the stories of those skilled artisans accompany you into the night, wrapping you in a comforting embrace of warmth and tranquility. Picture the flickering candlelight in a bustling workshop, the soft hum of conversation among craftsmen, and the sweet satisfaction of a job well done. May these images guide you into a peaceful slumber, where dreams are filled with creativity and inspiration. Wishing you a night of restful sleep, dear listeners. May you awaken refreshed and ready to embrace the new day ahead. Good night, and sweet dreams.